Welcome, weary travelers of the night, to Throne of Nightmares, where the shadows of history cast long, twisted tendrils into the present. I am your guide through the fog of the past, where forgotten souls linger, their stories clawing at the edges of our reality. Tonight, we step into a tale so unsettling, so impossible, that it has been buried beneath layers of skepticism and fear. A tale from the gaslit streets of Victorian England, where science and superstition danced a dangerous waltz. This is the story of the girl who lived without sleep, a medical enigma that defied the laws of nature and left those who witnessed it trembling in its wake. Picture a world draped in perpetual twilight, where the boundaries between waking and dreaming blur into a feverish haze. It is 1868, and the Industrial Revolution churns relentlessly. Smokestacks belch ash into the sky, and the streets of London are choked with fog, so thick it feels alive, a living shroud that clings to the skin. In this age of progress, where science promises to unravel every mystery, there are still corners of existence that defy explanation. Corners where the human body becomes a vessel for the inexplicable, where the mind frays under the weight of the impossible. In a small, crumbling village on the outskirts of Yorkshire, a girl named Eleanor Voss was born into such a corner. To the outside world, she was unremarkable, a pale, slight child with eyes too large for her delicate face, her auburn hair falling in tangled curls. But Eleanor was no ordinary girl. By the age of 16, whispers began to spread through the village of Thornwick, whispers that grew into rumors, then into legends. They said Eleanor Voss did not sleep, not a wink, not a moment of rest. For years her eyes remained open, her mind alert, as if the act of sleep had been stolen from her very soul. How could this be? Sleep, after all, is the cornerstone of life. It is the tide that pulls us under each night, washing away the burdens of the day. Without it, the mind unravels, the body decays, and madness creeps in like a thief in the night. Yet Eleanor, they said, defied this universal law. She lived, she thrived, and she watched, her unblinking gaze unsettling those who dared meet it. The villagers called her cursed. The doctors called her a miracle. But as the years passed, those who studied her began to wonder, was Eleanor Voss truly human, or had something else taken root within her? Tonight, we will unravel her story, thread by thread, as if peeling back the skin of a nightmare. We will walk the cobblestone streets of Thornwick, where the air was thick with coal dust and secrets. We will sit at the bedside of a girl who could not close her eyes, whose very existence challenged the boundaries of science. And we will ask the question that haunted those who knew her: what happens when sleep, the great equalizer, abandons you? What horrors await in a life without rest? But be warned, dear listener, this is no mere ghost story. This is a descent into the unknown, where the truth is more terrifying than any fiction. As we step into Eleanor's world, you may find yourself questioning the fragility of your own mind. You may feel the weight of her sleepless gaze upon you, as if she is standing just beyond the veil of your reality. So light a candle, draw the curtains, and settle into the darkness. The Throne of Nightmares awaits, and Eleanor Voss is watching. We begin in Thornwick, 1868, a village carved into the rugged moors of Yorkshire, where the wind howls like a chorus of lost souls. The air here is heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and burning coal, a miasma that clings to the skin and seeps into the bones. The houses huddle together like frightened children, their stone facades weathered by centuries of rain and sorrow. It is a place where time seems to stagnate, where the past clings to every shadow, whispering secrets no one dares to hear. And in one such shadow, in a modest cottage at the edge of the village, lived the Voss family. Margaret and Thomas Voss were simple folk, farmers by trade, devout by habit, their lives governed by the rhythm of the seasons and the toll of the church bell. They had 3 children, but it was their youngest, Eleanor, who drew the eyes of the village. Born in the bitter winter of 1852, Eleanor was a quiet child, prone to staring out windows for hours, her large hazel eyes fixed on something no one else could see. Her mother often remarked that Eleanor seemed touched by the other side, a phrase that carried both affection and a quiet unease. But it wasn't until Eleanor was 12 that the first signs of her condition emerged, like a crack in the foundation of the world. It began innocently enough, as such things often do. Margaret noticed that Eleanor no longer retired to her room at night. Instead, she would sit by the hearth, her small hands folded in her lap, her eyes gleaming in the firelight like twin embers. "I'm not tired, Mama," she would say, her voice soft but firm, carrying a certainty that chilled her mother's heart. At first, Margaret thought it a phase, a quirk of childhood, like a child refusing to eat her greens. But weeks turned to months, and Eleanor's sleepless nights continued. She did not yawn, did not falter. She was as alert at midnight as she was at noon, her movements precise, her thoughts sharp, her gaze unnervingly steady. By the time Eleanor was 14, the village had taken notice. Whispers spread like wildfire through the narrow streets of Thornwick, carried on the lips of washerwomen and blacksmiths alike. "The Voss girl doesn't sleep," they said, their voices hushed with equal parts awe and fear. "She sits by the window all night, watching the dark." Some called it a gift, a sign of divine favor. Others called it a curse, a mark of something unholy. The local physician, Dr. Samuel Hargrove, was summoned to the Voss cottage, his black bag heavy with instruments and skepticism. Hargrove was a man of science, a stern figure with a penchant for rational explanations, his grey whiskers bristling with authority. He examined Eleanor thoroughly, checking her pulse, her eyes, her reflexes, searching for the telltale signs of illness or exhaustion. But he found nothing amiss. Her heart beat steadily, her breathing was even, and her mind was as lucid as any scholar's. Yet, when he asked her when she last slept, Eleanor tilted her head and smiled, a smile that sent a chill down his spine, though he would never admit it. "I don't sleep, sir," she said simply. "I never have." Hargrove was skeptical, as any man of his time would be. Sleep was not optional, it was a biological necessity, as fundamental as air or water. He prescribed tonics, laudanum, even warm milk laced with herbs, each remedy more desperate than the last. But nothing changed. Eleanor remained awake, her eyes unclouded, her demeanor serene, as if she existed in a world apart from the rest of humanity. Hargrove began to visit regularly, not out of duty, but out of fascination, his scientific curiosity warring with a growing sense of unease. He kept detailed notes, which have survived in fragments, describing Eleanor's condition with a mixture of awe and dread. "The girl is an anomaly," he wrote in his spidery hand. "Her body defies the laws of nature, yet she shows no signs of distress. It is as if she exists outside the rhythm of life itself." Word of Eleanor's condition spread beyond the moors, carried by travellers and gossip to the bustling streets of London. By 1868, when she was 16, scholars and physicians began to arrive in Thornwick, drawn by rumours of a girl who lived without sleep. Among them was Dr. Nathaniel Crane, a neurologist with a reputation for studying the fringes of human physiology. Crane was a tall, gaunt man with a voice like gravel, his eyes perpetually narrowed, as if peering into the soul of his subject. He descended upon the Voss cottage like a raven, his black coat flapping in the wind, his notebooks filled with questions no one could answer. Crane spent weeks observing Eleanor, conducting experiments that pushed the boundaries of ethics, even for the Victorian era. He deprived her of light for days, sealing the windows of her room to see if darkness would force her to sleep. He subjected her to endless questions, searching for signs of delusion or fatigue, but Eleanor remained unchanged, awake, alert, and eerily composed, her presence both captivating and unnerving. Crane's notes, preserved in the archives of the Royal Medical Society, paint a vivid picture of those weeks. He described Eleanor's eyes as luminous, like twin moons in a face too pale for life. He noted her ability to recall minute details of conversations held days prior, her memory unblemished by the fog of exhaustion. But what disturbed him most was her silence. When asked what she saw in the long hours of the night, Eleanor would only smile and say, "I see what others cannot." Those words haunted Crane, who began to suspect that Eleanor's sleeplessness was not a medical condition, but something far darker, something that science could not touch. As the months passed, strange events began to unfold in Thornwick, each one tightening the knot of fear around the village. Villagers reported seeing lights flicker in the Voss cottage at all hours, as if Eleanor were pacing with a candle in hand, her shadow dancing on the walls. Others claimed to hear whispers in the night, words too faint to discern but heavy with malice, as if the air itself were speaking. A local farmer, John Harrow, swore he saw Eleanor standing in the moors at dawn, her figure motionless against the rising sun, as if she were communing with something unseen. The village priest, Father Edmund, declared her touched by the devil, urging the Voss family to seek an exorcism. But Margaret Voss refused, clinging to the belief that her daughter was blessed, not cursed, a gift from a God she could no longer understand. Yet, even Margaret could not deny the growing unease. Eleanor's sleeplessness began to take on a sinister edge, as if the absence of sleep had opened a door within her. She spoke less, her once gentle demeanor replaced by a quiet intensity that made her family's skin crawl. At night, she would sit by her window, staring into the darkness, her lips moving as if in conversation with the shadows. Her siblings, once her closest companions, began to avoid her, whispering that she was no longer their sister, but something else, something that wore her face. And then, one fateful night in the autumn of 1868, something happened that would seal Eleanor's legend and her doom. The autumn of 1868 was a cruel one in Thornwick. The moors were sodden, and the skies perpetually grey, and a sense of dread hung over the village like a shroud, thick and suffocating. Eleanor Voss, now 16, had become a figure of both fascination and fear, her sleepless gaze a constant reminder that something unnatural walked among the living. The physicians who had studied her had long since departed, their theories exhausted, their nerves frayed by the enigma they could not solve. But the villagers could not escape her. She was a spectre in their midst, her unblinking eyes a challenge to everything they knew about the world. It was during this time that Eleanor's behavior began to change in ways that could not be ignored, ways that turned curiosity into terror. She no longer spoke to her family, her words replaced by a low, melodic hum that seemed to echo from nowhere and everywhere, a sound that made the air feel heavy. Her mother, Margaret, found her one night sitting cross-legged on the floor of her room, surrounded by papers covered in strange, looping symbols that seemed to writhe under the candlelight. When asked what they meant, Eleanor only smiled and said, "They're for the ones who watch me." Margaret burned the papers in the hearth, her hands trembling, but the smell of ash lingered for days, sharp and acrid, like something alive. Dr. Nathaniel Crane returned to Thornwick in October, driven by an obsession he could not explain, a compulsion that gnawed at his soul. He had published a preliminary paper on Eleanor's condition, calling it chronic insomnia mirabilis. But his colleagues in London dismissed it as sensationalism, a flight of fancy unfit for the halls of science. Undeterred, Crane set up a makeshift laboratory in the Voss cottage, filling it with instruments to measure Eleanor's vital signs, thermometers, stethoscopes, and crude electrodes to capture the electrical activity of her brain. What he found was baffling, even to a man of his intellect. Her brainwaves were unlike anything he had seen, a chaotic symphony of peaks and valleys that suggested a mind in constant flux, neither waking nor dreaming, but something else entirely, a state that had no name. Crane's experiments grew more invasive, his desperation mounting with each passing day. He began to administer small doses of experimental drugs, compounds designed to force the body into sleep, chloral hydrate, even extracts of opium. But Eleanor's body rejected them all. Her pulse would slow, her breathing would shallow, but her eyes remained open, unblinking, as if mocking his efforts. One night, in a moment of reckless desperation, Crane injected her with a potent sedative, a dose strong enough to fell a grown man. Eleanor's body went limp, her head lolling to one side, but her eyes stayed open, staring directly at him. their hazel depths glowing with an unnatural clarity. "You cannot make me sleep," she whispered, her voice carrying an otherworldly weight, as if it came from somewhere beyond her frail form. Crane fled the room, his hands trembling, convinced he had glimpsed something not of this world, a presence that lingered in the air like a shadow. The turning point came on the night of November 3, 1868, when a storm raged over Thornwick, a tempest so fierce it seemed to tear at the fabric of reality. Lightning split the sky, casting jagged shadows across the moors, while thunder shook the earth like the wrath of an angry god. The villagers huddled in their homes, whispering prayers against the storm, their candles flickering in the draught. But in the Voss cottage, all was silent, too silent. Margaret awoke in the dead of night to find Eleanor's bed empty, the sheets untouched, the window open to the howling wind. Panicked, she roused the village, and a search party braved the storm to find the girl who could not sleep. They found Eleanor on the moors, standing atop a hill known as Blackthorn Rise, a place steeped in the village's darkest legends. She was drenched, her thin nightgown clinging to her frail frame, her auburn hair whipping in the wind like a banner of fire. But it was her eyes that stopped the search party in their tracks. They glowed, not with the light of the storm, but with a pale, unnatural luminescence, like the moon reflected in still water. She was speaking, her voice carrying over the wind, but the words were not English. They were guttural, ancient, a language no one recognized, yet it sent a chill through every soul who heard it. Father Edmund, who had joined the search, fell to his knees, clutching his cross, his lips moving in frantic prayer, convinced that Eleanor was possessed by a force older than the church itself. What happened next is a matter of dispute, a fracture in the narrative that has never healed. Some say Eleanor collapsed, her body finally succumbing to the strain of her sleeplessness, her heart giving out under the weight of a life without rest. Others claim she walked into the storm, her figure vanishing into the darkness as if swallowed by the moors themselves. The official record, penned by Dr. Hargrove, states that Eleanor Voss died that night, her body found lifeless at the base of Blackthorn Rise, her eyes still open, staring at the sky. But the villagers tell a different story, one whispered in the safety of locked doors. They say Eleanor did not die. She simply left, her sleepless soul claimed by whatever force had kept her awake, her presence lingering in the wind that howls across the moors. To understand the enigma of Eleanor Voss, we must step back into the world that shaped her, a world where science and superstition stood at a crossroads, each vying for dominance over the human soul. The year 1868 was a pivotal moment in Victorian England, a time when the Industrial Revolution had transformed the landscape, but the shadows of the past still lingered, dark and unyielding. The moors of Yorkshire, where Eleanor lived, were steeped in folklore, tales of wraiths and spirits that haunted the hills. Their whispers carried on the wind. To the people of Thornwick, Eleanor's sleeplessness was not just a medical curiosity. It was a sign, a portent of something ancient and malevolent stirring in the heart of the moors. In the 19th century, sleep was a subject of fascination and fear, a frontier where science had only begun to tread. Medical texts from the period, such as The Principles and Practice of Medicine by Sir William Osler, described sleep as essential to life, its absence leading to madness, physical collapse and death. The idea of a person living without it was unthinkable, a violation of the natural order. Yet, there were rare cases, documented in medical journals and whispered in the parlours of London, that hinted at the impossible. In 1834, a French woman named Marie Dubois was reported to have gone months without sleep, her mind descending into chaos before her death. In 1859, a sailor in Bristol claimed to have stayed awake for weeks, only to vanish under mysterious circumstances, his fate unknown. These stories, though rare, fueled a growing fascination with the boundaries of human endurance, a fascination that found its focus in Eleanor Voss. Eleanor's case, however, was unique, a puzzle that defied even the most learned minds. Her ability to function without sleep, To remain lucid and composed challenged everything the medical community believed. Dr. Nathaniel Crane's notes, preserved in the archives of the Royal Medical Society, reference early theories of neurology, including the work of Jean-Martin Charcot, who studied altered states of consciousness in Paris. Crane speculated that Eleanor's brain might have developed an alternative mechanism, a kind of perpetual wakefulness that bypassed the need for sleep. But he also noted the cultural context in Victorian England. Sleeplessness was often associated with spiritual unrest. Mediums and clairvoyants, popular in the seance rooms of London, claimed that those who could not sleep were attuned to the spirit world, their minds open to forces beyond human comprehension. To Crane, a man of science, such ideas were nonsense, but even he could not shake the feeling that Eleanor's condition was more than biology. In Thornwick, such beliefs were not mere superstition, they were gospel. The moors were said to be haunted by the Barghest, a spectral hound that prowled at night, its howl a harbinger of death. Blackthorn Rise, where Eleanor was last seen, was rumored to be a place of power, a site where the veil between worlds was thin. Local legends spoke of a 17th-century witch who had been burned there, her screams echoing in the wind, her curse lingering in the soil like a poison. To the villagers, Eleanor's sleeplessness was not a medical condition, but a mark of something otherworldly, a sign that she had been chosen or claimed by forces they could not name. Father Edmund's insistence on an exorcism reflected a broader cultural fear that the line between science and the supernatural was not as clear as the modern world wished to believe. The Victorian era was also a time of intense scrutiny of the human body, particularly the female body, which was seen as fragile, mysterious, and prone to ailment. Women were often diagnosed with hysteria, a catch-all term for behaviors that defied explanation, from fainting spells to insomnia. Eleanor's condition, though, defied such labels. She was not hysterical, she was unnervingly calm, her sleeplessness a quiet rebellion against the constraints of her time. Medical journals from the period, including The Lancet, speculated about nervous disorders that could alter the body's rhythms, but none could explain a case as extreme as Eleanor's. Her composure, her clarity, made her both a marvel and a threat, a living paradox that unsettled the rigid boundaries of Victorian medicine. Beyond the medical, the cultural obsession with the Gothic shaped how Eleanor's story was received. The 19th century was the age of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and Bram Stoker's Dracula, stories that explored the limits of humanity and the dangers of transgressing them. Eleanor, with her unblinking eyes and unearthly composure, seemed to step out of such tales, a figure who existed in the liminal space between life and death, waking and dreaming. To the scholars who studied her, she was a scientific anomaly, a puzzle to be solved. To the villagers, she was something far worse, a harbinger of the unknown, a reminder that some mysteries are better left buried. What does it mean to live without sleep? To exist in a state of perpetual awareness, where the boundary between day and night, reality and nightmare, dissolves into nothingness. Eleanor Voss's story is not just a medical curiosity. It is a mirror held up to our deepest fears, a reflection of the fragility of the human condition. To explore her tale is to confront the terror of the unknown, the dread of a mind that cannot rest, a soul that cannot find peace. At its core, Eleanor's sleeplessness speaks to a universal fear, the loss of control. Sleep is our surrender to the body's demands, a nightly ritual that humbles us all, rich and poor, saint and sinner. Without it, we are untethered, adrift in a sea of consciousness with no shore in sight. Modern psychologists might describe Eleanor's condition as a form of hyperarousal, a state where the brain is unable to downregulate, trapped in a cycle of alertness that consumes the self. But in 1868, such concepts were nascent, barely whispers in the halls of science. To those who knew her, Eleanor's sleeplessness was a breach in the natural order, a crack through which something else could enter, a force that defied explanation. The symbolism of sleeplessness runs deep in human culture, woven into the fabric of our myths and stories. In Greek mythology, Argus, The 100-eyed watchman was cursed to never rest, his vigilance a torment rather than a gift. In Shakespeare's Macbeth, sleep is the death of each day's life, its absence a punishment for guilt and ambition. Edgar Allan Poe's narrators, haunted by their own minds, often speak of sleepless nights, their thoughts spiraling into madness. Eleanor, with her unblinking gaze, embodies this archetype. Her sleeplessness was not just a physical state, but a psychological one, a window into a mind that saw too much, knew too much. Her cryptic words, "I see what others cannot," suggest a heightened perception, a connection to something beyond the material world, something that both fascinated and terrified those around her. This brings us to the question of the supernatural, a shadow that looms over Eleanor's story like a storm cloud. Was she possessed, as Father Edmund believed, her soul claimed by a force from beyond? Or was her condition a product of biology gone awry, a glitch in the machinery of the human body? The Victorian era was a battleground for such questions as science sought to banish the shadows of superstition. Yet, even today, we struggle to explain cases of extreme insomnia. Fatal familial insomnia, a rare genetic disorder, causes progressive sleeplessness, leading to hallucinations, madness, and death within months. But Eleanor showed none of these symptoms. Her clarity, her composure, suggests something else, a mind that had adapted to its sleepless state, perhaps at a terrible cost, as if she had traded one form of existence for another. Eleanor's story also resonates with the cultural trauma of the Victorian era, a time of rapid change and upheaval. The Industrial Revolution brought progress, but also alienation, as people were uprooted from rural lives and thrust into the chaos of urban centers. Thornwick, though isolated, was not immune to this transformation. The moors, once a place of mystery and magic, were being tamed by railways and factories, their wildness subdued by the march of progress. Eleanor's sleeplessness can be seen as a metaphor for this loss of rhythm, a world that could no longer find rest. Her unblinking eyes mirror a society that could not look away from its own transformation, even as it feared what it saw. Psychologically, Eleanor's story taps into the fear of the other within ourselves. Her sleeplessness made her an outsider, a figure both pitied and feared, a paradox that could not be reconciled. This mirrors the Victorian fascination with the monstrous, whether in the form of deformed bodies or aberrant minds. Eleanor was not a monster in the traditional sense, but her difference marked her as something to be studied, controlled, or exorcised. Her story asks us to confront our own fear of difference, our discomfort with those who defy the norms of human existence. It forces us to question what it means to be human and what happens when the boundaries of humanity are pushed beyond recognition. And so, we come to the end of our tale, though the shadows it casts linger still, like the echo of a scream in the night. Eleanor Voss, the girl who lived without sleep, remains an enigma, a puzzle that neither science nor superstition could solve. Her story is a reminder that there are corners of the human experience where answers falter, where the light of reason flickers and dies. Was she a medical anomaly, a soul touched by the divine, or something far darker, a vessel for forces we cannot comprehend? The truth, like Eleanor herself, slipped into the night, leaving only questions in its wake. What became of Eleanor Voss? The official record, cold and clinical, states that she died on Blackthorn Rise, her body succumbing to the storm that raged around her, her heart finally stilled by a life without rest. But the villagers of Thornwick tell a different story, one whispered in the safety of locked doors, passed down through generations like a forbidden secret. They say that on certain nights, when the moors are cloaked in fog and the wind carries the scent of rain, you can see a figure standing atop Blackthorn Rise, a girl with glowing eyes, her auburn hair streaming in the wind, her voice a low hum that pierces the heart. They say she is still awake, still watching, her sleepless soul bound to the earth, a guardian of secrets too vast for the living to bear. As we leave the gaslit streets of Thornwick behind, let us carry with us the weight of Eleanor's gaze, the chill of her unblinking eyes. Let us ask ourselves, What would it mean to live without sleep, to see the world through a mind that never rests? Would we see beauty, as Eleanor did in her moments of quiet wonder? Or would we see horrors too vast for the human mind to endure, shadows that lurk just beyond the veil of consciousness? Perhaps, in the quiet of your own night, you'll feel her presence. A whisper in the dark, a shadow that does not blink, a reminder that some mysteries are not meant to be solved. This is Throne of Nightmares, where the past refuses to sleep, where the forgotten rise to claim their place in our minds. Join us next time as we uncover another tale from the shadows, another secret that claws at the edges of reality. Until then, keep your candles lit and your eyes open. For in the darkness, Eleanor Voss is watching. Good night, or perhaps for some, there is no such thing.